Hi, and welcome to another episode. Lovely to have you back, or welcome if this is your first time here. Today I'm going to be chatting to another great guest, so let me go ahead and introduce her. Denise Duffield-Thomas is the money mentor for the new wave of online entrepreneurs who want to make money and change the world. Denise helps entrepreneurs release the fear of money, charge premium prices, and create first-class lives. Denise creates safe places for people to talk about money, cash, and abundance, and has helped over 8,500 students worldwide through her Money Bootcamp. Her books, Get Rich, Lucky Bitch, and Chill and Prosper, give a fresh and funny roadmap to living a life of abundance without burnout, and you know that I'm all about that. Denise owns a rose farm, although I believe it's on the market. So if
it
a rose
is.
farm,
I'd love to talk about that, yeah.
So if a rose farm is on your bucket list, it's absolutely stunning. Denise lives by the beach in sunny Australia and describes herself as a lazy introvert and an unbusy mother of three. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce Denise to the podcast. Thank you so much, Denise, for coming on and chatting with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. And it's funny, I was listening, I was like, I need to update my bio. So we've had close to 10,000 people go through my program now. And you're right, we are selling our farm. And even though I still live on the east coast of Australia, we sold our beach house a little while ago too, all in service of creating a more chilled life. Yeah.
I live at the beach. I can't imagine a more chilled life being away from the beach, but you do you.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's so funny. Well, what I realized, I was like, wow, you have to get your windows washed every week when you live by the beach. I was like, oh, that's in the too hard basket for me. And all of our house was getting all degraded from the salt air. But it was a really great lesson, though, in, we worked for years to build this house by the beach, and it was beautiful. And we ended up, the whole project was like a 7-year project, which is always, all of my projects seem to be those 7-year cycles. And realizing, going, this isn't for me. It's actually not that's not the dream anymore. Yeah. And giving yourself permission to change dreams is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's the thing, isn't it? I have a favorite saying that the best thing about choice is you can always make another choice. And that when we make a choice, it's not permanent, is it? It doesn't have to be permanent. We can do these things. But before we just get chit-chatting, because I know we could kind of just get into that, do you want to start by letting people know, how did you become a money mentor? Like, what led you to what you're doing?
Well, honestly, it really does come down to how I grew up. So I was raised by a very young single mum. She was 17 when she had me. And so we grew up in a very volatile, financially, emotionally, everything volatile. And so I really felt like at a young age, I really knew that I wanted to earn my own money. So that's my personal desire of why I wanted to become an entrepreneur, why I wanted to make a lot of money, is to have that freedom. Yeah. The other part of my personality, though, that was very strong, is that I grew up watching Oprah every day after school. And so I had this real personality trait of wanting to share everything that I'd learned from Oprah. And I'm still that person now. If I read a book, I want you to know about it. If I learn something, I want to share it. Yeah. And so if I was born, 20 years earlier than what I was, I probably would have been a teacher. Yeah. Instead, I had this real desire to make my own money and a real desire to share information with people. And so I think I just came of age at a time when the internet sort of came and I could share my solutions with more people. But I didn't know what that was going to be. So my first kind of ever business was an ebook called Internet Dating Tips for Men, because I was a young woman living in London doing internet dating and going, everyone sucks at this. How can I help them? And it's probably my Virgo nature too of going, you're all doing this wrong. Let me help you. And so that was one of my first kind of online businesses. And similarly, my next couple were about, I've learnt this thing, how can we do this together? Not even from a place of I know all the stuff. And so I became a life coach because I thought, can I just get over my ego about being a life coach and thinking it's not a real job and just do it.
Yeah.
And very quickly I realized that clients were coming to me with all sorts of problems and issues, but I really loved working with the entrepreneurs most of all. And then out of the entrepreneurs, I was like, I really love talking to people about money. And I had my own blocks around it because I thought, I'm not allowed to talk about money unless I'm an accountant, unless I'm a financial advisor. But the work that I was starting to do with people was that curiosity work of like, let's dive into some of your experiences around money and why you might be making those decisions today based on those experiences. And so even now, 13 years later of running my money boot camp, I still feel like I'm not a guru. I don't have all of the answers. I create a space where we can be really curious about where some of our sabotaging money behaviors can come from. And it really was that kind of natural progression of just being that person who just loves to sort things out and loves to solve problems with people. And it just naturally kind of led into money.
Yeah, I love that because it's that sort of you being curious and paying attention and listening, isn't it? And then evolving yourself and your business to what the people in your orbit are actually needing. I was having a conversation with my husband about this. I come from a psychology background and had moved into supervision, but then had people wanting to talk to me about how I'd set up my business and how I take care of myself in my business. So I evolved that into my business coaching. And it's really, isn't it, seeing what's in front of you and what people are asking of you. And for you, it's kind of that non-traditional money path, isn't it? And I get what you're saying in terms of that fear of, well, I'm not an accountant or financial advisor, so there are restrictions about what you can and can't talk about, but you're not coming from that perspective. You're really helping people understand, and I love that. A lot of the premise of my work is helping people understand who they are so they can make the decisions they need to do. And that sounds like that's what you're doing with people you work with around money as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. No, you go.
Oh, I was going to say, I find that a lot of accountants, bookkeepers, financial advisors, if they are working with women, oftentimes they recommend my book because they know that their clients will sabotage themselves or that they're really scared to even talk about money or think about money. And so they know that sometimes they need to do that foundational work. But also, I think that as we go in our money journeys, we will hit new and old money stories as we go along. And so we haven't had a lot of safe spaces, I think, to talk about money openly. And that's what I provide, is just to make it's not taboo, it's not scary. We're allowed to talk about it. And that sometimes is the conditioning for people, is that it's impolite to talk about money. It's, we're not allowed to unless we're someone. And I just want to make it really normal and normalized that, I have made a ton of money and I'm just a normal person. And we sometimes feel like we have to be really perfect before we're allowed to, do anything related to money.
And I love that you're shifting this narrative and I think particularly for people who identify as women, we have not been socialized to think it's okay to have money unless it's like the housekeeping money, to make lots of money. In fact, I think there's been messaging for many people. Look, I'm in my 50s, so certainly women my age, that, don't earn more money than men, don't strive to earn a lot of money. And the sort of things that we should be spending, we're not really encouraged to invest our money, but to spend our money on the things that, typically, quote, women should be spending their money on, like, makeup and clothes and all those things that are seen as acceptable. And hopefully that's shifting. But I think it sits within a lot of people. And I love that you're kind of disrupting that and giving people these spaces where they can talk about that. I'm curious to ask, what do you think are like the most common blocks that you see for people?
Yeah, so I talk about three that I feel like are very universal, but they show up in slightly different ways. So I think that's really fascinating. So the first one is you have to work hard to make money.
Yeah.
Now, this is very personal to everyone because working hard can mean different things. So in some families, it's like we are accountants, we do sensible things, that's what we do. And so then if you're born into that family, you want to be an artist, you think, I can't do it. I have to work hard to make money. In my family, my mum always had like quite menial jobs, and she had to have a lot of them. So for me, it was like, okay, well, I have to just work every hour because I'll never get ahead unless I do that. And so for me, I feel really guilty when I'm not working because I think I could be earning another hourly, wage. This shows up, I think, in most cultures, but I think it's really fascinating to see where the nuances are around this. So, like in America, for example, there is a very work hard, hustle kind of culture where you're allowed to show effort and you're also allowed to be happy with the results.
Yeah.
Now, in Australia, you can see you're not allowed to really show the effort as much. You can't show that you really care too much. And also you have to be quite like a bit sarcastic about your results a little bit, right? You have to kind of be a bit like, oh yeah, I did that, but whatever, it's no big deal. In England, I find this is really fascinating too, is like, well, I have to take my turn. I have to, because English people love queuing. It's like I have to take my turn and I have to, follow the process, and that's how I can do it. That's how I can work hard. There's not a sense of like, well, I'm allowed to leapfrog ahead, or I'm, allowed to use cheat codes in any way, whatever that might mean. So I feel like that's such a fundamental one for every person to look at. What's my relationship with work and money? Is it allowed to be easy, or do I think it has to be this one-to-one relationship where I do something and I earn money? And that's where people can struggle with creating passive income sources, with raising their prices, with being like a premium service, or, adding different things into their business, trying different business models because, nope, I have to work hard to make money. And even some people might struggle then with hiring, outsourcing, because I have to
do it all myself.
I should,
I've worked, coming from a psychology background, I work a lot with people in the helping professions, and that raising prices has been so much of my work with people, is getting them to a place where they feel not even more comfortable, because I believe we can still do things when we're feeling uncomfortable, but, getting people to understand that it's okay to raise prices.
Well, that's actually the second most common block I see. It's this, we take it down to distill it again into, I can help people or make money, but not both. And I see this so much in those health-related mental health professionals, any kind of physical kind of stuff. So I remember someone saying, I help people with pelvic prolapse. So I'm not allowed to, if I really cared about my patients, which I do, then I should undercharge, right? And it's that feeling of like, you cannot do both. And if you try, then you only care about the money. And, this idea of being able to charge win-win pricing and also have boundaries around stuff too, because sometimes for some people, it's not even what they charge. It's actually you let people be late, not show up, not charge up front, not, stick to time, let people contact you outside of working hours, working with people who emotionally drain you. So it's not even the price, it's all the things around it, because, so
what you're
that's
offering,
the biggest. Absolutely. And then the third block I see a lot is, I call it more money, more problems. And it's this fear that's very personal to each of us, that if I make more money, something bad will happen. So for some people, it's a visibility fear. They fear, I'll be hounded or harassed or trolled or hated in some way. For some people, it's I will lose my values. For some people, it's I will get into trouble. I will screw up my taxes. I will, make a mistake and I'll get into trouble. There's just this vague fear that we have that then filters into our day, where we think, I want to be successful, but I'm terrified of what that would mean. If you ask someone on the surface, they would go, no, of course I want the success. But it's still that feeling inside of going, it's not safe for me to make more money.
Yeah. Do you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Because everyone thinks, the biggest fear is fear of failure. But I've had so many conversations with people where the fear is actually fear of success.
Absolutely. And what is that going to mean for me?
Yeah.
And as I said, it's really personal for everyone. Mine is always people won't like me,
Yeah.
and the more that you can work on that and identify it, sometimes we just need to park that for our brains and go, you know what, I'll worry about that when it happens, or start putting things into place. So for me, I was very worried about getting into trouble. And for me, that has a very direct through line. I remember sitting with my mom in the welfare office, and they were questioning her. And there was this sense of, if she gets those questions wrong, we're not going to be able to eat. And I felt it very clearly as a child. And so then when I started my business, I remember you could go and meet someone at the ATO for free, that the government set up for new businesses. And that's a really nice thing, right? I was sweating because I was thinking, I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to get into trouble. I'm going to lose everything. And it was a very primal fear that I actually think has a much earlier kind of memory for so many of us of the tax man coming to your house. You remember those old movies with like the Sheriff of Nottingham or something, and it's like, oh, you don't have your taxes? Fine, we'll burn your house down.
Yeah.
Or the Grim Reaper, this idea of the tax man being like the Grim Reaper, I feel like was such a big thing. And also, I live in Australia where people were sent here for stealing a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
Great, we'll ship you off to Australia. So I feel like that for me was a big breakthrough to realize, oh my God, it's okay. I'm not going to be sent to jail for, meeting with this tax guy. But it was such an eye-opener for me to realize, oh my God, this fear of getting into trouble is stopping me in so many ways in my business.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Like, if we don't pay attention to some of that stuff, if you don't kind of unearth some of the things that are going on, we just keep making decisions when we're in our threat system. And they don't tend to be, unless you're trying to get out of a burning building, like making decisions based on your threat system don't tend to be the best long-term decisions. So being aware and understanding whether it's something from childhood, whether it's something from more recent in your life, it's really important, isn't it, for people to really understand what their own personal narrative is and what lessons they've learned along the way, what messages they've had from perhaps their family, so that we can make good decisions around this.
Well, sometimes you don't even know what those are until you're in community with other people talking about their experiences, because we just go, well, that's how it is for everybody, right? And I love that you use the word unearth, because I often say it's an excavation, and you'll find little nuggets of gold. You don't have to wait for the whole thing to be excavated before you take action, before you make money, because sometimes there'll be a little nugget that I'm still learning all the time. And I go, oh, no wonder I do that thing. I've got passion for myself. Okay, now I can go do that thing because I know it's an old story. And that is a constant process. There's no destination at the end. It's you can make money while you're learning all these lessons and being imperfect, because that's actually the lesson, right? Is that you don't have to be perfect to have whatever you want to have.
Yeah. And I think you bring up something important there as well, because sometimes you can't learn the thing until you're doing the thing that triggers the old memory or the feeling. I used to listen to people say, you can't work on relationship. You should work on yourself for a relationship before you get into a relationship. And it's like, yeah, but as soon as you get into the relationship, that's when the stuff's going to show up for you to work on. And I guess it's the same. It's the same with anything, isn't it? And the same with money. I mean, if you end up in a position where you don't have a lot of money in your bank account, it's going to trigger something. If you end up in a position where you've got a lot of money in your bank account, it's going to trigger something. If you have somebody ask you a question about your pricing, then it could bring something up for you. But if those things aren't happening, you can't necessarily pay attention to what it is that you need to work on.
Oh, absolutely. Which is why a lot of people find my work when they have something like that happen. They go, why can't I say my price? Why can't I charge? Or I feel stuck at a particular income level. But you really nailed it. And I sometimes would have people at the start when I was doing more one-to-one work with this, and they would be really analytical about it, and they'd be like, well, tell me what's going to happen if I do this work. Tell me what's going to happen if I do that excavation work. And I'm like, you have to just do it.
Yeah,
like,
you don't know.
No, exactly. It's like, well, yeah, you don't know. And same with things like, we're talking on a podcast now. 10 years ago when I started doing podcast interviews, this would have kept me up all night. I would have been sleepless all night thinking, what am I going to talk about? And now I've done probably 1,000 podcast interviews, right? Does not bother me at all. The idea, though, of going on live TV would terrify me, and so I always think it's like what scares you today won't scare you tomorrow if you just, with the repetition of it, and then you can, do that excavation work when something comes up.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to you, like, don't limit yourself. I could say the same. I would never have imagined I'd have started my own podcast. And I love it. I love it. And I used to be very organised, and I'd think of all the questions I was going to ask, and I'd send them to the person, and I'd be rehearsing what I was going to say. And now I just like, hey, Denise, like, a few little things to check in before we hit record. And then it's like, let's just have a chat. So it's that thing, I think, of don't limit yourself. And I think that's the same with money. Now, I come from a sort of middle-class background, but then when I came to Australia, I ended up in a domestic violence relationship. I ended up as a single parent. I was on welfare for a time. One of my hardest memories around money was when I was still married. I'm now remarried to a very beautiful man, so I'm not talking about him. But when I was married, walking around the supermarket with a calculator, because I had very, very limited amount of money to spend on food. And I know that used to play into a lot of things for me. But I think it's this thing of don't limit yourself, because you just don't know what's going to change, how life's going to be, and the sort of decisions you can make. And I can remember through my career having conversations with my now husband, sort of saying, I want to increase my prices, but what if all my clients leave? And these real fear-based decisions to now, creating new offers and pricing them in a way that feels right for the value that I'm giving and what I want to be earning for my time and knowledge and education and what I'm providing as a service. So I think, not limiting ourselves is really, really important. And if we don't understand what we're holding and what we're carrying and the stories we tell ourselves and the beliefs we have, we absolutely can limit ourselves, can't we?
Absolutely. And that's, again, where that curiosity piece comes from, to say, where is this coming from, and how is it benefiting me, or how is it harming me? And so Mark and I come from similar in some ways, but different. So he's from the UK, grew up in a small town, also with a single mum. But the way that our mums were around money was very different. So his mum was very good with money, but the way she showed her love was through abundance of food. And for us, because we moved a lot, my mum is a just-in-time kind of cook, right? So she'll still do it today. She'll go to the shops and she'll buy 1 carrot, 1 onion, and everything in our she just doesn't like to have a lot of possessions and things. And now she lives in a motorhome, which is exactly her personality, right? Yeah. So Mark and I got to a point in our marriage where he would stand in front of the cupboard in the fridge and he would say, there's nothing to eat. And I would go into absolute panic in my body, because I would feel the scarcity of that. Because for me, I would look at that same cupboard and think, we could make 20 different things from that, right? Because my mum is that person. She can make a whole meal out of a French onion soup mix and a carrot and an onion, and maybe a bit of meat, right? And so I had to sit with that and go, why is this triggering me so much? And then to sit down, not only to do the work myself, but also to sit with him and say, this for you're looking at that going, for that level of food in the cupboard, your mum would be panicking and thinking, I don't have enough for everyone, because that's how she showed her love. Abundance, a chest freezer, an overflowing cupboard. For me, that gives me panic, because I think, well, what if we have to flee literally a domestic violence situation and we've got all this stuff? And what are we going to do with all this stuff? It felt like a burden. Yeah. Then the next realization for me, even a couple of years later, was when I would feel very uncomfortable when people would give me gifts. And I still do a little bit, because then I was like, now I have to take care of your stuff too. Now I'm responsible for your stuff when I have to flee in the middle of the night. And it felt like a burden. And so then to be able to sit down with Mark and say, when you say there's nothing to eat, my 6-year-old self thinks that she's going to starve, and it makes me incredibly scared. And then we could change our language around that. And that was life-changing for me. But also, again, there's nothing wrong. This is just, my conditioning. And also I can understand, my triggers and see then where it shows up. And that's the work that I do with people. We don't just excavate for the sake of it. We go, what is a direct consequence of that? What belief did you decide in that moment? What things have kind of calcified a little bit, and then directly what's your behavior now? So for someone hearing you're not allowed to talk about money or getting into trouble for that, setting your prices is going to feel horrible. Raising your prices is going to feel horrible. Telling someone they owe you money, sending an invoice, chasing an invoice is going to feel in every fiber of your being, I'm doing something wrong. So you excavate that, and then you create a different pattern. So for me, obviously I'm not a psychologist, I'm not trained in any of those modalities, but even just having community around you that's doing something different, saying something different. And I love to use affirmations as a pattern interrupter for myself. So it could be, instead of, Mark and I saying there's nothing to eat, we started to say, lucky we're rich. And that became our pattern interrupter of going, wow, I'm safe. There's always more. That's okay. I'm safe. And that's then you can have that compassion for yourself and change.
Yeah. And that's so key, isn't it? Moving yourself out of your threat system. I work with a compassion-focused therapy framework, which I used when I was a psychologist and bring into all of my work, and really teach people the emotional regulation system of threat, drive, and soothing, so that we can understand when we're in threat, we need to regulate our nervous system. We need to move ourselves out of threat so that we can make decisions from a wise place, and then take action on that. So I love that that's part of the process, because like you said, there's no point excavating for the sake of it. And then you're just left with all this stuff that you feel really crap about.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, this is so bad. So we need to then say, okay, how can I recognize what it is, B, when it's showing up, and then what can I do to shift myself out of threat and make a new decision, perhaps tell myself, like you say, whether it's an affirmation or whatever it is that is helpful, and give yourself a new story, a new narrative. I always talk to people in terms of, creating a new history to look back on, because when our history is difficult for whatever reason or unhelpful, that's all we have to look back on. But as we start to create these changes and we do things differently, we create a new history to look back on. And then we can draw on that. Like now you can look back and say, well, you do have enough money in the bank and you do have enough food. And if there's not enough food in the cupboard, you've got plenty of money in the bank to go buy some more.
Absolutely.
Just order online, go to the shops, whatever you need to do.
I even think it's beyond that for me. I love that you said create a new history, because this week my daughter, or all my kids had to wear something orange to school.
Yeah.
And, the night before at like 5 p.m., we're like, who's got something orange to wear, right? And my daughter's like, oh, I can wear this dress. And it was like this long flowy dress. I'm like, you can't wear this. So I tie-dyed a white shirt with food coloring and then stamped like the name. And I was thinking, this is what my mum taught me, right? Is to be creative with what you have.
Yeah.
And in that moment, it did feel like I rewrote that story a little bit and go, oh God, I'm a resourceful person. I'm so resourceful. And I'm so, even having undiagnosed ADHD for years, which was such a source of stress for those last minute craft projects and homework projects. I was like, I was born for this. This is great. And then the next day, because it was still wet, like blow drying this shirt and just going, nothing's bad, nothing's wrong. This is fun,
Yeah. And that's beautiful as well, isn't it? Because, some of the stuff we all look back on in life is not easy to look back on, and it's not been helpful. But I think if you can draw some of that okay, this is that part of the story, but then there's also this part of the story, and perhaps that's the part I'm going to take with me because that is the part that's going to be helpful. You know, there are a lot of things that I've been through in my life. People say, oh, do you wish you hadn't? I'm like, no, well, no, I don't, because I've learned so much and there's things I've taken from those. So I love that you've been able to kind of look at that and go, yeah, actually, it's made me a very resourceful person. And there's things you will do that are probably, from an environmental perspective as well, probably not wasteful, you know.
Oh, God, I've taken that too far sometimes too, because I remember as a kid when there was the council pickup day where everyone put all their stuff out in the street, and I'd be like, oh, what can I do with this? And I'm still a little bit like that. I'm like, oh, what can I do with you? Oh, I can transform you. And then Mark makes me throw it. He's like, what are you going to do with this? And I'm like, I will transform it one day. And so then now I've got a bit more resources. I went a little bit too far on that at some stage of my life where I was like, oh, I'm responsible for all the broken things.
Yeah.
And then going back and recalibrating that and going, I can choose, to make something out of trash, and I can also buy something.
Yeah.
And, we often overcompensate, don't we? And then we have to find that healthy medium.
Yeah. I love, you speak so much to that need for awareness of self. Like you're so aware of whether, and maybe not in that initial moment, as most of us, we do something and we reflect. But that awareness of once we get to know what we're doing, is it helpful? Is it harmful? Do we want to keep doing it? What is it doing in terms of the other choices and decisions we're making in our business? So I love that you speak so much to that. But also you mentioned undiagnosed ADHD. I also am late identified. I was identified autistic ADHD at age 52. Might have been helpful. Might have been helpful if it was a bit earlier than that. But however, here we are. And you attract, as do I, entrepreneurs and business owners, of which I don't know the statistics. I'm quite curious, and one day might look into it a bit more. Quite curious about the statistics of neurodivergence. Neurodivergent entrepreneurs and business owners. But we spoke before recording that we attract a lot of neurodivergent folk. What are some of the things, I guess, particularly with ADHD, because there can be a lot of impulsivity.
Oh, yeah.
That you notice with perhaps, the people you've worked with or conversations you've had with people in terms of money management or money skills with that, and maybe some things that could perhaps be helpful for people to hear if they are struggling in that way?
Oh, absolutely. So I was diagnosed at 42. I'm 45 now. And it was very obvious now when you look back that I did have it my whole childhood. But I think because my mom is so off the charts, also undiagnosed, I felt like I was the normal one. Yeah. So I was like, I'm normal. They're all nuts and disorganized and so I developed mechanisms very early on. And also I wrote my book, Chill and Prosper, pre-diagnosis, and I realized that it's a manual for ADHD people. Very much. Like one of the chapters is called Keyless Life, about how to create systems in your business. And I'm like, that's literally because I lost my keys my whole life, which is such a classic ADHD thing. And yeah, I agree with you. I think it's like 15% of the normal population. I would say it's like 90% plus in the entrepreneurial world. And because we do seem to flock together, right? And so I do see it as exactly what you said, that impulsivity, the instant gratification, which makes us brilliant action takers oftentimes, right? Because we don't have to think things through a lot of the times. We can kind of just go with our gut. And then I see, as people make more money, it's the same behavior, just with bigger numbers. And so, and I've had to watch that in myself too, of just going, well, there's always more money, it's only money, whatever. And taking that prosperity mindset a little bit too far into like almost like magical thinking a little bit, right? And knowing that there is a happy medium. I am not great with money still. And so what I've had to do is I have a financial team. You know, they send me reports every month. I meet with them quarterly to discuss taxes.
Yeah.
And so it's not like changing your behavior. It's being understanding and going, this is something that I do. I can be very impulsive. And a good example of that is I almost bought a house and I had my financial advisor there and he was going, there's something wrong with this house. And I was going, shut up, Steve. You're being such a Debbie Downer. You know, I was like, I've made my decision. Like I saw the house, I went home, I started packing and put my house on the market. And my mum's friend was visiting and she was going, what are they doing? Because we just started packing up the house. And Mum goes, they've made a decision, right? And so we were in negotiation with this house and we kept on bidding more and more. And my financial guy was going, I'm going to find out what's wrong with this house. And he went and did all the research and he goes, they don't have a building certificate. It was an owner builder. They don't have a building certificate. If you get this certified, you might have to pull the whole house down. And there was a point where I was like, I don't care. And then I went, you know what? Let's just sit on it and let's not make the decision. And it felt like, I'm going to be really crass here. It felt like a fart that I was holding in that I was like, and that's what sometimes that feels like for me when I just want to take action. I'm like, but I've got to burst this bubble. I've got to get the dopamine or whatever it is. And you might think, oh God, that sounds so unrelatable doing it with a house. But I was like that with little trinkets or bits as a kid where I'd go, I've got $1, so I have to spend this dollar. Otherwise I'm going to vomit from the, anticipation of it. And so I just said, I'm just going to not take action on this. Yeah. And we decided to pull out and it went for auction a couple of months later at like 1.5 million less than we had bid for it. And so I have to have those things in my life because I do not have the capacity to go and do that research and to find out those things. And so I need to put little mechanisms in my life. And it's almost like what they say in like Alcoholics Anonymous, where they're like, you can drink tomorrow, but you can't drink today. Yeah. And I sometimes do that with myself when I feel the urge to blow everything up. You know, when ADHD people are like, I'm just going to burn everything to the ground. And I go, okay, you can do that tomorrow.
Yeah, give yourself some space.
Exactly. Or you can buy that thing tomorrow or just sleep on it. And then I sometimes just forget about it, you know. And I had to watch because I actually had a lot of enablers in my life, not in a bad way, actually in a really good way, where for a while, where especially at my farm, because we, built this beautiful farm, and I'd go, oh, what would it look like to, pull that tree down? And they'd just go do it. Yeah. Whereas if it was up to me, it would never happen. I would just go, wouldn't that be nice? Also, I think too, when you're a creative person and you can always think of the bad things, or is it catastrophizing? I always say it wrong. Yeah. So what I would say to myself in that moment, I'd go, oh, you're creative. That would be an amazing book. It'd be such a good movie. And it like pops that bubble for me of getting too hyper-focused on something. Yeah. And I share that, Alcoholics Anonymous thing, not to be in a trite way. I hope no one feels that way, but a lot of the time for us neurodivergent people, we get a little hyper-focused on something, even if it's not in our best interest. Yeah. And so just using those tools to say, yep, you can burn it down tomorrow, but it's not today. You can, buy that thing tomorrow, but not today. Yeah. We won't always get that all the time. I've definitely bought courses I shouldn't have.
Says everybody all the time.
Yeah.
Who hasn't said that?
But on the flip side, I've seen people who have taken years to make a single, should I start a podcast? What are the pros and cons? Yeah. You could have just started a podcast by now. Yeah. So it's finding where it works for us and where it doesn't, and finding those mechanisms. And as I said, I'm never going to be that research person, but I can hire someone, and sometimes I listen to him and sometimes I don't.
Yeah. It's finding that happy medium for ourselves, isn't it? But again, you speak to knowing yourself. Like if you didn't take the time to know yourself and be really radically honest with yourself that I am not that person that's going to do the research, you could have, made some really unhelpful decisions. So I think when we can know ourselves and we can be willing to be honest about this isn't who I am, and actually I need somebody else to take over that, or I need to just not do that thing, or whatever it might be. I think that's what becomes really, really helpful. Yeah.
Well, it does. And then you can be very practical around that, right? So I often say to people around like their business model, if you're someone who needs a lot of variety and a lot of freedom, don't sell a long-term mastermind, because I see it in people, or a membership necessarily, because I see people get to month 2 or 3 and they're just like, oh my God, what have I done? And so just because you can do all the things doesn't mean you should. I've had like my husband, Mark, when he came in the business, he was like, everyone's asking for a mastermind. This is an amazing opportunity. And I went, it's not my thing. So the phase of life that I'm in as well, I'm like, I cannot do that business model. He's like, we can $1 million extra dollars.
Goodness me, I'm sorry.
So that's okay. He's like, we could make an extra $1 million out of it. And I was like, but it's not my business model. Someone else, they would love that. It would fill them up. It would be, it'd feel so good. And I think we sometimes go against our, knowing ourselves because a mentor has told us, or someone else that we look up to has that business model, and it does for us. And so, yes, we have to have the awareness, but we also have to have the permission and the self-compassion to say, it's okay that that's not for you right now. And it's okay that you do this thing. It doesn't mean that you're unworthy of making more money, or, it's the perfectionism that we have in ourselves. It can be so crippling.
Yeah, I think a lot of self-doubt in people leads them to copy or think that they need to do it the way somebody else is doing, which can lead to things that are just not helpful at all. And I do apologise. Typical ADHD, I have so many alarms in my phone to help me through my day, which I always have had. And when I got identified, I was like, that's why I have like 752,000 notes and 12 alarms a day. So yes, apologies for that rather awful alarm that went off.
No, I get it as well. I have mine. It's like, I've got one that's like, stretch and drink some water.
Yeah.
Take your meds. It's so funny when people say that ADHD meds are addictive, and I have to set alarms to remind myself to take them.
I was going to say, really? If only I could remember.
Exactly. And remember to fill them.
Yeah.
And I filled mine yesterday, and I was like, I had procrastinated for a couple of weeks on that. I'm like, really?
I mean, it's, there's things that are really helpful, like you say, and really powerful about being neurodivergent and allow you to do the things you do. And then there's things that are difficult. I knew I had to take my medication this morning. I was like, well, I'm going to do a podcast. I'll take it before, and then forgot to turn off my 8:45 alarm, which is when I normally take it. So there we go. You mentioned I mentioned in your bio that you talk about yourself as a lazy introvert, and I know you use that term kindly. I certainly would ask people to reflect on that word if they were using it in a critical way, but I know you don't. But also an unbusy mum of 3, which I think people might be listening and go, how on earth can you be a business owner and have 3 children and be unbusy? So what I would like to ask is, how do you take care of yourself in what I'm sure has a level of busyness to it, because how could it not? Mm-hmm. What sort of things do you do? Yeah.
The reason why I say unbusy mum is because I notice in the media, whenever there's the word of mum, they always have to use the word busy in front of it, in a way that you never see busy dad of 3. And so it was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek way to disrupt that busy mum kind of thing. And of course, life is full.
Yeah.
I have my kids are at the moment, they're 6, 8, and 11, and they have a ton of activities that they all have to be in different places. And yet, I think where I want to encourage people to do as well is, again, it's the phase of your life, the season of your life, and to honor that. And I've really surrendered to that at the moment, to say, actually, I can't go and do speaking gigs in this phase of my life. I choose not to do it. I absolutely could. I choose not to add that stress to my life. Do I want to do lots of big launches? I choose not to in this season of my life. And also, it's really important for me now to do things that are just for me. So I do ballet. I do 8 classes of ballet a week. I make art. I do all of these things because I want my kids to see as well that my life is important too. And my art is important. It's not just about driving you to ballet class. I've got my own ballet class to go to as well. And so then there's consequences to that. So, and that's why I say there's no bad business model. It's always just implications, right? Yeah. There's customer service implications, or there's team implications to any way that you run your business. When my kids were smaller, I had a full-time housekeeper because I was in a busy period of my life where I wanted to make lots of money and I wanted to, work more. So the consequence of that is I couldn't do all of those things at home. Yeah. And I'm using consequence not in a bad way. There was energy implications. Yeah. If I wanted to do that amount of work, something had to give, and it wasn't going to be me. Yeah. I hate when people say advice, get up at 4:30. And I'm like, no, that is not good advice. Yeah. And some people will be like, well, I can't afford that. Well, it's like, yes, okay, what can you afford right now? And so I met someone, multimillionaire. She still does all her own laundry. And I remember just going, why? And I get it now, because she was in a phase of life where she's like, I'm surrendering to the phase of life my kids are at. I don't have an active business at the moment. Yeah. I don't have anything, big projects. And my full-time housekeeper moved away about a year ago. And I just went, actually, I don't need that level of support at home at this phase of my life. And so I'm the one doing the laundry at the moment. Well, I get the kids to help me do it. And I'm like, I'm a multimillionaire. And I'm like, I don't need to have that right now. But I did that a couple of years ago, where I was like, I'm not going to cook a meal. I'm not going to wash a thing, because I am doing this. Yeah. And I think that is, again, it's that you can be really busy and not feel like it if it's a choice. Yeah. And when you feel like I have to, that's when you feel burdened, resentful, all of the things. So and especially if you're starting and you don't have the budget to do it, and say, for example, you're starting your business, you don't do the laundry first. The laundry comes at the end. You do your money-making work, you do your joy work. The housework fits into your life. You don't, not the other way around. And sometimes that is a money and a budget thing, but I actually think for so many people, it's a mindset thing. I feel guilty if I don't, the kitchen's probably a mess there, because I started my podcast today at 7 a.m. and Mark had to get the kids. I'm like, but this is what I'm doing. This is important to me. And so at the when we first started my business, and yes, we didn't have kids, but I remember Mark saying, oh, can you go to the post office for me? Or why didn't you put washing on? And I said, because I was working. Yeah. And I had to set boundaries with him, with friends, with family, to say, this is important to me to carve out time for. The laundry can wait. I don't care if the kitchen isn't dirty. And also, do your chores on your lunch break. Yeah. This is what I'm building for our family. And, it's really then going to, how do I run my business? I can't do everything right now. Closing some of those loops of going, I should be, writing 50 books this year. No. Yeah. What's the one thing you can do this year that will make you the money? And honestly, sometimes we think it's a time and money thing. So many times it's a permission thing and pissing people off and saying no to people.
I love that you, excuse me, I love that you spoke to that. I think it's important that people hear people say, I was privileged enough to have a full-time housekeeper. I was privileged enough to pay someone else to do this. Because I think, particularly for people who identify as women, there are a lot of people out there who look and think, why can't I manage it all? What's wrong with me that I can't cope with running my business and looking after the children and running the household and doing the shopping and cooking the meals and other things? And Cherie Clonan from the Digital Picnic recently did an article, and I've just been at her conference. It was amazing. So next time the conference is on, people should definitely go. It's fantastic. But she wrote an article around people who are successful are not doing all these things themselves. They are in a position where there's people doing other things in the background. And I think it is important for people to hear that. But also I love that around that mindset piece, because again, I think we've been socialized to, but you're supposed to have the washing done. You're supposed to have the meals done. You're supposed to do all these things. And I mean, for some people, maybe you're you're doing this as a hobby. Most people I speak to and work with, this is not a hobby. This is a legitimate business, and it deserves to be treated like a legitimate business. And like you say, maybe that's hard conversations with people saying, actually, that's not just my responsibility, or that needs to wait till I finish work because what I'm doing is important. So I love that you spoke about those. Now, I'm really mindful of the time and that you are on a schedule to do some more podcasts, but I do need to ask you my question that I ask everybody. And that is, if you could meet your 80-year-old self today, what do you think she would say to you?
Oh, wow. Well, I actually hope my 80-year-old self is still being a creative person. So I actually think, I would love to just both of us to celebrate each other, really. That's the thing. And I there's some things in my life I can't do right now. One of my dreams is to be in a show, like in a Broadway show. And I'm like, that will come later. And I'm like, what are all the shows that have old lady roles in them?
Oh, I love that.
I'm like, so cool. because I'm just, again, surrendering to the thing of this is a time of my life where my kids need me, but they're not going to need me forever. And I'm going to continue to be a creative person for the rest of my life. So there's time. And I hope that she would say that to me as well, and to say, there is time, just continue, being creative and giving yourself permission to be creative, because that's where it's going to lead to. And I hope she's just doing cool stuff. And I was actually listening to John Lithgow on a podcast yesterday, and he's like 85 or something, right? And he's just living his creative life. And I'm like, that's what we all want for ourselves. And Jane Fonda's coming to Australia. I'm going to go see her. And
fantastic.
She's creating things and, making movies and being an activist. And I'm like, there's time for
it's not too late. It's never too late, right?
No, absolutely. And it's that scarcity thing, right? Is the cupboard half empty, half full? And I just think, no, I am the affirmation I created a couple of years for myself was, I am a creative genius. And when I remind myself of that, then I go, I am creative. I am a problem solver. And just because I'm in this phase of life where my kids need me a little bit more, I'm allowed to do it. And so that gave me permission then to make art, to do my cross stitch, to do my ballet, because that's who I am. I'm a creative genius. And however that comes out, it doesn't have to just be with work.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. And I don't know if you can hear the drilling that I can hear.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I just want to end on this thing that, we can plan things, can't we? I plan to have this podcast before 9:00 because that's when people are not allowed to start any work in the building. But the person upstairs has decided that they are a rule breaker. So
they're like, it's close enough.
It's close enough. And I'm like, thank you. I planned Perfect this timing. So well, but best laid plans. But Denise, thank you so much for coming on and chatting. I just know that people will have found this really helpful. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And I just wish you all the best with your business, your creative pursuits, all the things.
Thank you, Hayley. And if anyone wants to connect, I'm on social media at Denise DT. So Instagram is probably my thing that I'm on the most. And then my website is denisedt.com as well. So thank you for having me on, Hayley. I appreciate all the questions and all the juicy conversation. And I'll see you next time.
You're so welcome. And I'll put all those details in the show notes so people can come and check you out. Thanks so much. See you all next week.